Liam Neeson really wants you to know that he's a man with a very special set of skills.
But what I do have are a very particular set of skills.
Before Taken made Neeson an unlikely action legend, he was an actor known more for quiet, contemplative roles and wise mentors. I'd like to look back at Liam Neeson before Bryan Mills and all the roles that led to his action stardom. If there's one film that likely led to Liam Neeson's stardom, it's Rob Roy. The film starred Neeson as Scottish hero Robert McGregor, who rebels against English aristocrats. The film itself never manages to get out of Braveheart's shadow, which came out the same year and got a lot more attention. What did get a lot of attention was Liam Neeson's performance as Rob Roy. It was clear to critics and audiences alike that Liam Neeson was born to swing a sword on the big screen. The final duel between Robert and the truly vile Cunningham is one of the most satisfying sword clashes ever filmed. The skill set he built in this film undoubtedly led to his sword fighters Qui-Gon Jinn and Henry Ducard in Batman Begins. There have been 7 Star Wars movies since The Phantom Menace came out in 1999. Somewhat lost in all of that Skywalker drama is the simple awesomeness of watching Liam Neeson's Qui-Gon Jinn mow through a gang of droids with his sidekick Obi-Wan right behind him. Sadly, Neeson's time in the galaxy far, far away was cut short, literally, by one wicked move from Darth Maul. This ended Neeson's galactic superhero career, but he'd continue as a wise and noble mentor for most of the next decade. Ewan McGregor might be getting all the attention right now for reprising his prequel role as Obi-Wan Kenobi in his own Disney Plus Star Wars series, but Liam Neeson beat him to it. While most characters were voiced by new actors for the Clone Wars, Qui-Gon Jinn was notably played by Neeson himself. It was a heartwarming moment for fans of the series who are still messed up over the loss of Jinn in the series. He said that he would love to reprise the role one more time. Did you hear that, Disney? Funnily enough, the choreographers on Phantom Menace actually struggled with Neeson. His legitimate skills from filming Rob Roy kept coming into conflict with what they needed for lightsaber combat. In hilarious contrast, they had the opposite issue with Ewan McGregor because he wouldn't stop making his own lightsaber noises. I mean, who am I kidding? I would 100% do the same. Okay, you're right. No one could ever forget Qui-Gon, but I just had to mention it. Can you blame me? Still, I promised a forgotten Neeson role here, so here's a clip from him in a Dirty Harry movie, The Deadpool with Jim Carrey. Crazy, right? For some reason, Gangs of New York seems to be one of the Martin Scorsese films that rarely gets talked about anymore. Everyone's seen Goodfellas, The Departed, and Taxi Driver, but Gangs kind of fell through the cracks. All that you really need to understand the awesomeness of Gangs of New York is the opening scene. I mean, it depicts New York City in the 1800s as rival gangs were having it out over the 5 points of Manhattan. Those groups were led by Liam Neeson's giant cross-wielding priest against Daniel Day-Lewis's knife enthusiast Bill the Butcher. Naturally, the conversation between the two gangs doesn't go far, and they start attacking each other. What follows is one of the coolest battle sequences ever filmed. It's not the longest Liam Neeson role, but not everyone can stand toe-to-toe with Daniel Day-Lewis. Though, I gotta say, the giant cross he was holding as a weapon didn't hurt. Leonardo DiCaprio comes in after this sequence as Neeson's son, including his own battle sequence with the Butcher, but to me, the film never quite gets back to the epic heights of that first scene. While Saving Private Ryan is the Spielberg World War II movie people watch every Memorial Day, Schindler's List is the kind of movie most people can only bear to view once. There was a time when Liam Neeson wasn't known as Bryan Mills or Qui-Gon Jinn. Back in the mid-90s, he was known as Oskar Schindler. Steven Spielberg's haunting masterpiece is certainly well regarded today, but it's not the easiest Netflix movie to pick on a Sunday afternoon. That's likely why few today could probably tell you that Neeson is the titular Schindler. It's a shame because Oskar Schindler may be Liam Neeson's greatest performance. The character takes extreme risks to save others from unspeakable horrors. Playing through the complex emotions of Schindler not only made Neeson a household name, it earned him his one and only Oscar nomination. It's hard not to get choked up every time you think of that scene where the heroic Schindler laments that he could have got more.
I could have got one more person.
Notably, this also features the same actor that played Lord Voldemort, who portrayed perhaps the only character more irredeemably evil. It's kind of amazing that in a world where Game of Thrones, The Witcher, and Lord of the Rings all have prequel series on the way, there's no news on Narnia. Netflix announced a new series was in the works, and we've heard almost nothing about it. This is very surprising considering how well regarded the original film was. Sure, it was no Harry Potter level of success, but what is? Perhaps the aspect of the film that garnered the most universal praise was Liam Neeson's pitch-perfect performance as the lion Aslan. He commanded the character with compassion, grace, and the power needed for the godlike character. Few of the children watching The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe weren't horribly traumatized by the moment where the White Witch stabs poor Aslan and then proceeds to wear his hide as a coat. This was a kids' movie? That didn't last long, though, because you just can't keep a good lion god down. He managed to pull a Gandalf in the end and brutally got his revenge on Tilda Swinton by eating her face. Again, in a kids' movie. The only thing I can't figure out is who makes the better CGI lion, Liam Neeson or James Earl Jones? It's a tough one for sure. When 300 dropped and everyone lost their minds over it,
This is Sparta!
Hollywood banked on sword and sandal action movies being the next big thing. That didn't prove to be the case, but we did get Clash of the Titans out of the deal. Probably the best part of that film is the fact that Liam Neeson was cast as freaking Zeus. Talk about perfect casting. It actually became a problem for the film because the sequences with Zeus and Hades were so good that it overshadowed the actual plot. It wasn't a big surprise that the two teamed up in the sequel. Luckily for Neeson, they didn't get to the part in Greek mythology where Kratos rampages through the entire pantheon like a jacked-up Wolverine. That was a Greek myth, right? I will never understand why the A-Team wasn't a bigger deal. I mean, it was an action movie Avengers with Neeson as their leader Hannibal. It also starred Bradley Cooper as Face, Quentin Rampage Jackson as B.A. Baracus, and a perfect Sharlto Copley as Murdoch. The cast has excellent chemistry in a big popcorn movie with action scenes galore. Most notably, it features a scene where the gang flies a tank through the air. Over the course of his career, we've seen Neeson as a wise mentor, an emotionally distraught dramatic hero, and a glowering one-man army. Rarely do we ever get to see him have as much fun as he does playing Hannibal. I mean, look, I get why the movie didn't win an Academy Award for Best Picture, but I don't get why it underperformed at the box office. I mean, they made 3 Expendables movies. We could have at least gotten one A-Team sequel. Kingdom of Heaven kind of represents a bygone era of film. It was a giant 2.5-hour film, or 3-hour if you watch the extended one, that depicted the brutal battles of the Crusades. Now, don't get me wrong, they 100% still make things like this. It would just be a Netflix series today. The film featured several large-scale action sequences, sword fights, and Orlando Bloom. Naturally, this proved to be the perfect fit for Liam Neeson. At this point, a medieval action film was exactly in Neeson's wheelhouse. I can't recommend it for its historical accuracy at all, but if you want more Liam Neeson wielding a sword, this will certainly get the job done. Today, when people think about a Les Mis movie, they think about the musical version starring Hugh Jackman and Russell Crowe's bad singing voice. Long before the famous Broadway musical got its time on the big screen, the original novel got an adaptation. This version saw Liam Neeson perfectly embody Jean Valjean against Geoffrey Rush's Javert. As the title of this film might tell you, it's a pretty miserable time for all of our heroes. Without the songs, score, and triumph of Broadway backing it, this Les Mis actually focuses more on what the story is supposed to be about, the horrors normal people suffered around the French Revolution. The two stars absolutely nail their characters, but the film does start to leave the book behind in areas where it probably should have just stuck to the source material. There were moments it was clear the screenwriter may have skimmed over a few bits of the 1,400-plus page book. Alright, I got a question for you. How does no one talk about the fact that Liam Neeson was a superhero in a Sam Raimi movie? Pretty much every superhero movie that didn't make mainstream success, from The Rocketeer to Spawn, is a cult classic. For some reason, Darkman is one that hasn't quite found its way into the same conversations. It was an R-rated, dark superhero movie in the time when superhero movies were like Batman Forever. It was about a scientist who goes on a revenge quest against the people who tried to burn him alive. That explains why his superhero persona is wrapped in bandages instead of a colorful mask. Weirdly enough, this would be great practice for his future roles, starring alongside the likes of Batman and getting brutal revenge. It's one of those wonderful cinematic artifacts that shows how the superhero movie genre pushed boundaries and made daring choices before it finally found its true footing. I, for one, am not surprised that the director of this was the one who blew up the genre with Spider-Man years later. If you want to see another superhero film, or another film where Liam Neeson goes on a rampage, give Darkman a shot. While Liam Neeson has recast himself as a hardcore action star, I do think he deserves credit for just how often he makes fun of himself. From Ted 2 to Daddy's Home 2, no one loves a Liam Neeson joke more than the man himself.